Since we're talking about your YouTube videos, and I guess your career kind of trajectory, do you feel like you've had to work harder to kind of prove yourself as a woman than your male counterparts would?
Absolutely. So the minority pressure we've already talked about, and like proving you're not a token, but also knowing that you're a token and that's why you're asking. All of that absolutely adds up. And actually, I want to say that a lot of people assume I mentioned the YouTube videos because I think this is on YouTube and this is where people recognize me from, but I've done a massive amount of internal work and specs writing and mock-ups and designs that it's just not public, and people don't see. So they'll assume that they're like, oh, so you're just like a YouTuber who makes videos and demos, and it's like, not at all. Actually, the bulk of my work, that's been like 5-10% of my job. Most of my job is doing the job, being a product manager, driving a team and setting all priorities and reading through literally thousands of tickets and bugs to deduplicate, and contacting customers and getting better designs, talking with hundreds and hundreds of people, PM stuff.
Yeah,
the PM stuff.
Doing the things that the video actually shows.
Yes, like all of that good well-designed products that my team produced was an accumulation of doing the work, which I'm really proud of. But it's also really important not to it's easy for people to overlook, and you always get the vibe that obviously I've had to make that speech before.
Do you think that's related to the YouTube videos, or do you think that that's just like constantly something that you have to deal with?
Yeah, I think people, they'll kind of take and acknowledge that, like you provide value in this way and only this way, and then you don't get credit for all of the other ways that you have done a job. I don't know if they would make the same assumptions if I was a different gender, or less like associated with the diversity movement and representation and all of that.
That's actually a great topic to jump in on. Let's talk about this diversity hire concept. Do you ever feel like people look at you like you were one?
So I was one. And let me tell you how ridiculous that is. I'm freaking qualified for what I do.
Yes.
Plot twist. I was promoted really, really quickly, and it's because I get a lot of things done. People tend to like working with me. Just to like toot my own horn a little bit. I was, even at Microsoft, I was earmarked for like advancement programs. They have I forget what it was called, something like Sales Ninja or something like that, where like they earmark you for leadership, and because you've been promoted quickly and your performance reviews have been really good. Like I got into Microsoft and I did really well, and it's because I had qualifications, and that alone should have been enough. Wild that they would have missed this opportunity right here without that program. And it kind of goes to show that maybe like the diversity program should be most of the recruiting program if they get good candidates from it, which they tend to, instead of a small part of the recruiting program where they're still filling the bulk out. But it makes you kind of wonder what opportunity is being missed.
Right. Basically, it's setting people up for success and not putting them in a role that they're not able to, to grow into and be successful in. And then that kind of just like perpetuates the stereotype of them being the diversity hire. Know people's strengths. Don't put them somewhere where they can't succeed just because it's important for this, back to the tokens concept, because it's important for visibility.
Yeah. And if you have like a time frame of when they've graduated, like just get them up to speed, be super invested in their journey, give them education, make yourself available, not just, we'll let you try it. Right. And I think that can be really damaging too. So
I agree.
Time segment, high investment, able to accomplish a milestone and transition and feel like fully empowered after that.
Right. Because otherwise you also end up with imposter syndrome, like you were saying, where you question for your entire career of like, am I just here because of, I fit some box, or am I here because I'm really good at my job and I'm doing well?
Yeah. I haven't entirely been cured of imposter syndrome, but those things in my life, when I had hiring managers who've hired 10,000 people literally at Microsoft, they were a part of those things over the 20 years they had worked there. They just tell me, nope, like you got in, you made it, you were like a smart hire for us. At a certain point after I had that education, that was a great place to feel. So diversity programs help people get their foot in the door and get up to speed, and then they graduate, and then they're just there. But yeah. Someday.
One of our executives at UiPath, I asked him about imposter syndrome once, and he said, I think that if you don't feel some type of imposter syndrome, you're doing something wrong.
I like it.
Thank you. I have a bit of a bummer topic now. Okay.
Bring it down. Let's get real.
All right. Now getting to the core of being, a woman in tech. Do you ever feel, or have you ever felt uncomfortable because of, a male colleague's actions, whether it's physical or just verbal things that have happened?
Yes. So I want to answer this question, but I don't want to relive everything. But I think a lot of people see me and they think, oh, she's positive, like she's always excited about work, she still loves technology, it hasn't dampened her spirits, she must have been lucky. Nope, still had really bad experiences. And yeah, so I just want to call out, don't assume that people haven't had to put up with a lot to be where they are in weird things, just because it didn't stop them. I have had those assumptions made about me, like, oh, like, Kendra, you must have never experienced any awful things at conferences or other stuff. And it's wrong, I have. So I just want to acknowledge that for other women out here who are watching this, who need to hear a little bit of that validation that it does happen. Right. Yeah, it's something we all got to deal with.
Yeah, I just, going back to the intro video I did of this series, my goal here is for women to understand that these things that happen to you, it's not you. There's nothing wrong with you. You're not alone.
It's a systematic problem.
A vast majority of us have experienced some kind of this in one flavor or another. And it just because we act like all is well does not mean that it hasn't been a component of our career, and that it's going to continue being a component of our career, unfortunately.
Or just because we're successful doesn't mean that we were lucky.
Yeah.
It probably still happened in all regards.
Yeah.
One question you had was, did you ever feel unsafe because of a male colleague? And I can say not a male colleague. And actually, which I'm so thankful for, the people I've worked with on my teams have been genuinely great and amazing. The bad interactions I've had were usually with external people from the company or at conferences. In fact, and I can kind of weigh, there's good people and bad people here. In one situation, I had male allies there that stepped in and made sure that person was removed. I was a little afraid they might punch a customer.
Oh no.
Which in some ways is therapeutic to think about it. But like they absolutely helped me in those situations. Like it was an evening, we were celebrating after a really successful day of conferences and talks and booth duty, and it's in that place where I thought I was safe because I was surrounded by people I knew. And then I didn't know that there was this other person who had been lurking in the shadows waiting, which sucked. But it was de-escalated so quickly because I had a wall of people who were just as on guard as I was and watching out for me. So be one of those guys.
That's
if you're trying to be a male
me.
ally, like be aware of how other people are acting around you. And
Yeah.
so I have really good friends that I'm thankful for, despite the situation occurring in general.
Right.
But,
But I think this is a really good time to remind some of our male counterparts and colleagues that even if we don't necessarily like ask or say that, you know, this is making me really uncomfortable, can you please remove this person? It's a good idea to check in with us. We might just not have felt comfortable bringing it up. But if you notice our behavior changing, or you notice that we're getting quiet or kind of shying away, sometimes it's just easier if you check in and ask if we're okay, because we're a bit more likely to let you know.
100%.
Yeah.
I think quietness was my like initial reaction before I was like, halt, stop, no. And they picked up on it really quickly.
Yeah. Yeah. Especially if you're somebody who's quite talkative, that kind of change.
I never shut up. Come on.
My friends know the same. Yeah. The going quiet, I think, is your first kind of alarm.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I've also had my fair share of experiences like this. I wasn't as lucky. I didn't have male colleagues who stepped in at the time, but I think a lot of us aren't that lucky, and it's just something we have to deal with.
Yeah.
Yeah. Sorry, I did tell you it was
education. So no, yeah, that's true. But education and validation and just the general awareness that it's still happening and there's things you can do.
Yeah. Okay. Well, moving on to a slightly less bummer topic. It's my last question for you, actually. So we see the phrase women in tech all the time. Obviously, that's what the title of this series is. Do you ever hear something like, your experience as a woman in tech is so, exciting, or this or that, because you're a woman?
As a woman, yeah.
Yeah, or it qualifies as, it's so great that you did this as a woman.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And I always have mixed reactions to this, because the tone of how they say this depends so much on tone. Because honestly, genuinely, I'm impressed with how much I've accomplished.
You should.
Despite the weird things we have to put up as women in tech, the people who derailed us and ask about to present and do work on things we're not related to, that won't help us in our career. Tokenization. And I had a professor in college who made interesting remarks about like just assuming I would not take advanced classes, or that I was, despite me being one of his top students who had spent hours and hours in office hours with him. I absolutely adored discrete logic. I would sit down and study 10 hours for a test that I knew I would ace. I just wanted to get like an A+, like 100 rather than the 98. Like that's what I was going for. Because I was we got to use Haskell. It was so fun. It was so fun. And then to hear just general discouragement about how far I'd get, or like what I was genuinely interested in, and assuming I wouldn't do research into it with no context, was really strange. So there's all kinds of really strange things like that people underestimate you, or just situationally expect less or different or weird things about where you're going to go and how far you're going to go. And I love blowing that out of the water.
Yeah.
So I'm impressed with myself despite what I put up with. But then you also don't want to hear a tone that because the tone can be like, because you're a woman.
Yeah.
Which, it can communicate something different. Like you were put at a more of a disadvantage, not because of all of the weird experiences that you have to go through and the hoops you have to jump through, but for something else, because they actually think lower of women in sciences or something. So recognizing the tone and having context of why, as a woman, that qualifier is added.
Yeah. I have a funny anecdote on this topic. Years ago, I was, back in my previous time as a software engineer, when I first moved to New York, and I was like out and about, a young person hitting up the bars. I met this person at a bar, and we were really hitting it off until he found out what I did for a living. And as I told him that I was a software engineer and, his face was dropping, and eventually he sat there in horror with his face in his hands and he said, "But you're a woman. How are you smarter than I am? How are you doing these things? You're pretty, and like I'm an engineer too, but you're better than I am." And this reaction of, oh my God, the world is ending because you're a woman and you're also
because he would have never expected that to happen. Like,
right.
That's this tone thing I'm talking about. That's not a good.
It was
not past.
Needless to say, that didn't go anywhere. But the experience was so shocking for me because, in college, I never had anything like that happen when I was studying CS. In fact, everyone was super supportive. But finding random people and having them just be horrified that this is what you do for a living, despite what you look like, it's just a very awakening experience.
Absolutely crazy. You don't want to be the force that's normalizing that in someone's life. It should just have been they should have come in with a different expectation.
Yeah. Oh God, he was so sullen. I just blew my mind.
Yeah.
But that is exactly why tone and the for a woman qualifier is so important, because it can be very positive. Like, wow, despite all of these, horrible things that have kind of almost kept me from succeeding, I made it as a woman.
Yeah. And that's nice to acknowledge, but how you acknowledge it and why in context.
Exactly. You're right. Double-edged sword.
It can go both ways. Like, it's complicated.
Yeah. Thank you so much for your time and for your candid questions and answers. And this has been a really, really fun video. I'm really excited to see how people react to it.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you so much for having me. I love watching these types of videos. I did it a lot when I was entering the field too, just to be like, what's her deal? What are her tips? And really, really fun.
Amazing. Well, everyone, stay tuned for my next videos and let us know in the comments what you thought. See you soon.